Okay, guys, so I just wanted to get on here and do a little review, kind of talk about what you did in class today. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Kinsley is not feeling well. She has a stomach virus that's kind of been making its way around the area, from what I understand, and it's not pretty. So I wanted to kind of review what you did today in class and walk you through everything since you will have an assessment on it tomorrow. And it is a 19 question, it might be a little bit more, 19 question quiz plus your map. So you for sure need to know the map that we did in class. It's on the backboard. Um, you will need to be able to label the map. I did put that picture also on Classroom, so you have access to that there, but you also have it in your packet and it's on the whiteboard in the back. Um, so you'll need to know all of that. And then you'll need to know from the intro and section one that we did yesterday. But basically, your packet of notes is really your study guide, essentially, for this quiz. But I did want to kind of just go through everything. I don't want you to feel like you're completely out of the loop for the quiz tomorrow. Um, but basically, if you look at section two, you'll see that it's really starting to talk about the physical features. You're looking at actually all the environmental factors that we talked about yesterday and remember what those are. So um, you kind of just want to know what's around and how it makes that nation um, run the way that it does and it impacts them. Um, so the big things is looking at the deserts. Obviously, they're surrounded by deserts. You can see Egypt has the Libyan on the left and the Nubian on the right. Plus, you have access to the Nile River, which is your freshwater resource. You have access to the Mediterranean Sea, which is your saltwater resource. Um, and so that really was super helpful to the Egyptian people. Um, the the deserts provided a natural barrier, which we know is a good thing. It helps us with protection. Um, and the water resources supply, obviously, drinking water, fishing, transportation, bathing. We went over that whole list yesterday. So you'll just kind of want to look at that. It talks about the borders. Sorry, I'm just kind of seeing what I want to tell you. Um, I mean, most of this is kind of common sense. Obviously, there wasn't water in the desert, and so people moved to the Nile because of the freshwater resource. You have very rare vegetation in the deserts. Um, the topography, remember the topography is the shape of the land. So, um, where you had flatter areas and by a river, that was much better for people for farming purposes. So most likely people lived in that area. Um, so that's kind of section two. And then if we look at section three, um, it's looking at Canaan or the kingdom of Israel, basically, and just telling you the differences between Egypt, Cush, and Canaan. Um, and you'll see the nice thing about Canaan is they have multiple water resources. They have the Mediterranean Sea on their western side, and then their eastern border is basically the Jordan River, which is their freshwater resource. And it flows south actually. So it flows south from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is the saltiest body of water in the earth. It's called the Dead Sea because nothing can live there because of the salt content. And actually, if you get in the water, it's so salty that your buoyancy level is so high that you actually just float, which is pretty cool. Um, but the Sea of Galilee is actually a freshwater resource too, which is interesting because you usually don't see seas being a freshwater resource. What else do I want to say? So basically, this area was a really great area to live because of all the water resources. We know that water equals life because no water equals death. So a lot of people were in this area. This is where the faith of Judaism began as well. Um, but you're going to see most of the people that lived in this area were nomads and herders because of the type of topography the land had and the type of soil that the land had. So most people in this area were nomads and herders. Um, if you read section 4, well, it's basically just a summary of the um, the lesson that also gives you kind of like I like it because it gives you a brief synopsis of the whole lesson. If this would open, there we go. But it just talks about the 3 environmental factors: water, topography, vegetation. It talks about the early settlement of Egypt and Kush. Um, excuse me, my throat. I'm not feeling that great now. So um, it is what it is. And then the early settlement of Canaan. This is a really good source to kind of just summarize the whole section for you. But then I also wanted to give you some insight for the quiz. Excuse me. Um, so um, I thought I would just go through some of these questions with you. These are questions that you're going to see on your quiz. So I want you to be really well prepared because I will be there in the morning for map testing. Um, but I'm going to leave in the afternoon so I can take care of her because she's contagious. And so I can't send her to school. So you'll have a sub in the afternoon. And I do believe it's going to be Mrs. Webb is going to be your sub. But you'll take the assessment with her. I'll have it all set out for you. But I figured I'd kind of go over it with you so you can study this video as a tool as well, since I won't be there in person. So the big thing is, let's see, you need to know what topography means. Remember, topography is the shape of the land. So is it a valley? Is it a mountain? Um, the actual shape. It has nothing to do with the climate. It has nothing to do with like growing seasons or anything. It is the shape of the land. You need to know what the Nile Delta is. Obviously, we know the Delta is a marshy area that connects with the Mediterranean Sea. But anytime you hear the word delta, you should almost think automatically a marsh. Um, Obviously, the number one thing, if you don't learn anything from me this year, where do people settle? They settle near a freshwater resource. Okay, so you're going to find life by freshwater resources, which is a river. Why are deserts a good thing? Well, deserts are a good thing because they offer protection from people. They're a natural barrier. People love the Mediterranean Sea because you could transport on it, you could wash clothes in it, you would get food from it, and that's the number one resource is the fishing because you have such a variety of fish in that area. So the Mediterranean Sea was great for fishing. Um, it also talked about the yearly flooding and how it was actually a good thing. And it was actually a good thing because it would um, stir up the soil and then it would have some of that silt come out. And that's that fine mineral that helps farmers in the long run. So that's why flooding was actually a good thing. Um, Vegetation along the Nile River, the best vegetation along the Nile River that was helpful for them were reeds and papayas. Um, Papyrus is what you say actually, because they were useful for medicine, for tool making, for paper, but they had the most benefit with them. So reeds and papyrus were really great plants near the Nile River. You need to know, obviously, where the Egyptians were located, where the Cushites were located, and then where the Israelites were located on the map. Um, know the borders of Canaan. So we know that the western border is the Mediterranean Sea, the eastern border is the Jordan River. Um, Also know that the Sea of Galilee is a freshwater resource, unlike other seas that you see. Other seas that you see. Um, the Sea of Galilee is a freshwater resource, so that's unique. And the Dead Sea is so salty that no life can actually live in it. Um, the unique thing about the Jordan River is it actually did not flood regularly, so it wasn't good for farming because the water would not get out onto the land and give that silt. So that's why they became herders and nomads, because the Jordan River did not flood and it wasn't great for farming. Um, Obviously, we know we're going to see vegetation mostly around a water resource because plants and vegetation need water in order to survive. Um, Herders lived a nomadic lifestyle because they were constantly moving. So if the animals had grazed enough in one area, the herders and their animals would all move to another location. So they served a very nomadic kind of purpose, moving from place to place. You also need to know how the physical features affected their life. So obviously, the Nile River is the biggest one, and that affected them by giving them drinking water, transportation, bathing, water, washing water, food, because animals would come drink the fresh water, um, and saltwater resources. Obviously, are great water resources. You can't drink from them, but they did provide abundance of fishing, which is great. And then the deserts offer protection. So that's kind of what I wanted to say, how I wanted to review. I'm sorry, it was kind of like a random thing that I had to leave, and obviously didn't plan. I didn't plan to leave, and my fifth period, I did talk to Mrs. Current, and she said that you guys were great today, so I appreciate that. Sixth period, I hope the same was for you guys. Um, Please email me if you have any questions. And I will see your beautiful faces tomorrow. Have a good night, guys.